Twitless, get us started. What are we talking about today?
We're talking about Absolute Superman, which is another one of this all-in initiative with edgy and unique takes on some of the DC mainstays. We've already talked about Absolute Batman. Absolute Wonder Woman has also released, and obviously can't have the other two parts of the Trinity without leaving out the main man himself, Superman. This is written by
Jason Aaron.
Jason Aaron, and Rafa Sandoval, who has also done quite a bit of art recently for both Action Comics and Superman. He was the artist behind the House of Brainiac, if anyone is keeping up with contemporary Superman comics. And so we get to see a reimagining of Superman's origins from a completely different point of view.
Yeah, and I I for one think I wanna speak to the quality of the art here. It's really high quality, even
Mhm.
for DC.
Oh,
I
yeah.
felt like this is, like, top shelf what I expect from Image Comics, for instance, when I see something that really stands out, that has a lot of lush detail. There's not a lot of shortcuts being taken in this. Yeah, and speaking from the art perspective, this is a really strong offering, even, as for DC in particular, where I'm used to seeing some pretty good stuff. This reminds me, for my kind of indie perspective, like, finding something that has, probably something closer to what you could expect from, like, an Image run, uh, with some really top tier talent. I thought it was very technically well put together. I don't see any shortcuts here, like we've seen from other mainstream, Big 2 stuff that we brought up in the past. I feel like this was a really strong effort to put something together that is, visually arresting. So, just first pass, I want everyone to know that this is a very high quality, visually put together comic book.
The quality wanes significantly when we're talking about the storytelling, though.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a bit of a car wreck, in my opinion. I'm a little surprised. Jason Aaron is pretty good. There's about three acts, I would say, in this story, and the second two don't work for me. And pretty much all of the reimagining doesn't work at all. It
Mm,
made Superman not much of a character in this
yeah.
story. He's very shallow, very two dimensional, meant to just serve convenient narratives that Jason is trying to convey in this story, which kind of took me aback. I didn't realize that he would take this route of reimagining Krypton to be a classist society.
You didn't
uh,
like that? Cities versus the countryside, the
it
The
farmland.
S the S stands for slave.
it's so contrived. It's so hollow
Yeah.
and shallow. It's missing the whole point of, like, honestly, if you're going to do an absolute, reimagining of the DC universe, wouldn't you want to capture the spirit of the essence of the original properties as you try to reframe them in some kind of modern setting or some unique fashion that you want to envision, project
Mhm.
your own perspective into the original lore? He gutted everything about the original story here, and I don't recognize any aspect of it, and what's left is pretty stale, in my opinion.
I actually do recognize something that's kind of interesting. So I actually like that a chunk of this comic takes place around mines. And
Yeah.
this is actually something that is, if you're familiar with some very, very old Superman lore, back in the 19, 30s and 40s, Action Comics number 3 is a story all about mine working and about how the higher ups at the mine mistreat the workers and don't respect them and have terrible safety procedures. So Superman was back in the golden age. Actually, did multiple two of them that I'm aware of, and maybe even more, specifically about mining. And so a chunk of this story has to do with mine conditions, and so that there's the mines on Krypton, which are not run properly by elitists who, don't care about their workers. And then essentially that is then mirrored by with Jason Aaron's kind of invective about modern contemporary, capitalist people who are running mines badly. And so obviously Aaron is leaning very much in a particular political direction, but I would argue that in a very bizarre way, it's actually very much in keeping with certain aspects of Superman's lore.
I felt like the Earth-based mining story was probably the weakest part of this because the characters that it surrounded uh, just weren't interesting on any
Yeah.
level whatsoever. And they just served as a vehicle for Superman to make an appearance, which wasn't even clear why he made that particular, uh, you know, reveal of his character, how he came to be in that location, and why he chose that moment to actually intervene in their circumstance.
Yeah. He was tired of hiding, I think he said, and then he just got really angry and,
Great.
turned to flames or something. He got really hot.
Yeah.
Was It's kinda interesting. There's a lot of this, we've talked in previous, videos about what makes a story a superhero story specifically. There's a lot of interesting stuff here where I kind of it you know, everybody on Krypton still has S's or different kinda symbols on their chests. I don't know why that needs to happen, except that that signals superhero story, I guess. But there's other stuff that they deconstruct to the point, I don't know, it just kinda feels like sci-fi tactical, like Lois Lane is, you know, she's got, like, a chest rig with a, uh, I don't really know what's going on with a lot of this, and it doesn't really feel like you even need Superman to have a cape or, like, I don't know why this has to be a superhero story at all. Do you know
Mhm.
what I mean? Like, and it
It
doesn't
isn't.
explain itself except that it's a remix of the original.
It isn't.
So that's something I've been wondering about.
The whole story is workers' revolt. I mean, there
Mm,
are no superheroes here. It's all just class warfare,
I
as far as I
yeah,
I'm
can tell.
well said.
I'm gonna push back on that. I do think this is a
Please.
superhero story. I think it is a it's definitely a story that I think it needs to grow into, and its full superhero-dom, as it were, and I think that's something we're seeing
Mm,
in all 3 of these absolute stories. Is these are all very much sort of like meant to be this sort of origin, essentially, and putting these characters on story arcs to end up in slightly different places because of where they start, but they're all gonna end up as a version of Batman, a superhero, Superman, the superhero, and Wonder Woman, the
did
superheroine.
did you
Uh,
did you get that sense from this particular story that this is a super story, this particular Absolute Superman?
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far and a fourth book on the way. Order your books today at curiecomic.com.
Modern day, classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
I did. I just, but it's like it's
Mm,
one of those things where like it has to grow a little into it.
okay.
This issue is, and I will concede, this one's definitely lighter on some of those elements. It leans more into the sci-fi angle, but you can see the pieces. They're just, and Aaron I think
Mm,
is planting some seeds. Some of those seeds I rolled my eyes at. I think one of the lines, and Jason Aaron should be barred from saying this ever, but I think he talks about illegal sciencing,
Mhm.
and
mm,
that just made me die of cringe.
yeah,
So that was the low point of the issue for me, was illegal sciencing. But aside from that, like, you see the seeds of justice, injustice being planted, and this is straight out of Action Comics #1. You know, the man who will fight for the oppressed, and that was what Siegel and Schuster put like in the tagline for like every single issue of Superman and Action Comics. And so we have to
yeah.
establish that there's a great deal of injustice, so that Superman can rectify it. In the
But what did
original,
he
though,
do? What injustice did he combat in this story?
He told them
He just
that if they're mining blood diamonds, they need to demand equitable wages.
yeah,
and that's where the
yeah,
difference comes in, because this is supposed to be a Superman, because in the original version, Superman's mission was entirely, he knew it, and from day one essentially of those comics. And in this one, because of how the origin's playing out, um, he doesn't quite know it yet. But this is
Mm,
Kal-El. He's going to figure it out, and so we get to see him at a different point in his superhero journey that we're not used to seeing. Some people that's not going to jive at all, and I do acknowledge that. I think there are some people who are going to go, okay, I'm okay watching him a little earlier before he's fully figured out what it means to be a superhero. But the seeds are there. The injustice, his desire to do something about it, his desire to not kill, his desire to, like, use force to make things right. Not entirely sure exactly how to do it, and obviously Aaron putting in a dose of current day politics aside, it definitely is a superhero story. Whether it plays out to being a good one or not, it's hard to
okay.
say from issue one.
So this is more of like an Aragorn arc, like in his Strider phase, I suppose. That's what's going on here.
I just feel like they didn't give any characterization. You
Mm.
you mentioned seeds, and this is Kal El. He's going to figure it out. I don't know how you recognize Kal El at all in this, and they might have suggested certain character attributes. The whatever the voice that was talking to him. I don't know what that was supposed to be, a robot friend in his head or something, but suggesting that he might have certain moralities and motivations doesn't really give him a character arc or a characterization or any kind of depth. It's just people commenting about him as he's doing things otherwise in the story. So it's very um, it's just very shallow. I just don't know how else to put it, and I don't recognize this as a character in any sense. Maybe, as you're saying, it'll grow into that in later issues. But here, there's really just nothing established. He just gets into fights. He tells people they need to stand up for their rights as workers, and then he ends up getting. Was he arrested by Lois Lane at the end?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, can
So
we talk about Special Operator Lois Lane?
sure.
Yeah, what's up with that? Like, I guess, I mean, we know what we're getting into. We can't just say thing is different, so thing is bad. We're open to this. We know what we're getting ourselves into. But is that an interesting angle to explore? Does that seem like something was it like Team Lazarus or something? Like, is that kind of interesting to see instead of a, press agent,
So I,
like
I think I think we run
trying to
into
escape?
the I think we run into the exact same thing that we ran into with Absolute Batman, which is
Mm,
tactical Alfred, and we lost in the exchange. We lost the Butler archetype. We
mm,
have the exact same scenario here, or very similar one, with tactical Lois Lane,
yeah.
and she's what she's done at the end is she has manacled herself to him. So it's that sort of like, if he leaves, she's coming with him, and that's gonna obviously cause some shenanigans, I'm sure. But yeah, we will in getting the tactical, pouches and body armor and Kevlar, we
Mm,
also lose that feisty reporter character who was always competing with Clark and sometimes getting the edge on him or the drop on him, often not. And their flirtatious, love situation there at the beginning from a journalist perspective. Now she's a military woman because she has to be, different.
Tactical Alfred is better though than tactical Lois, in my opinion. So
Why so? What's your
mm,
having like the aged, warrior. He's war weary. He's going to the city. He's fighting for something, trying to preserve it. She just runs up and throws handcuffs on Clark. So it's like
but but she's but is okay, but she's kind of more unique, right? Like, there's not many. I mean, who is she compared to? Black Widow maybe or something? Like, I'm trying to think. She doesn't really blend into, superhero lore, right? Like, she doesn't. I'm trying to think of who.
Maria
I
Hill?
feel like she's
She's
still standing out, right? It's just kind of dumb that she's standing out in this particular
in
way,
this
I
book,
guess.
she has the same problem almost all the characters seem to have, is that there just
Mm.
isn't a character there.
Yeah,
I could
you're
argue
right.
that maybe his parents had a little bit of an arc here,
they did.
and They're established to a degree. They're both revolutionary intellectuals, is the way I would put them. They both defied the establishment and the norms. They had opportunities to enter high society and live among the higher classes, and they chose to follow their principles instead, which led them to the subordinate conditions of that planet,
Mm.
and basically using their intellect to further the work that was being done there.
Lara wanted to be an astronaut, and the regime said, "No, woman, you cannot be an astronaut."
No, they were opposed to the idea of space travel and the
Yeah,
science of, space
right.
exploration.
So, Aaron is definitely being heavy-handed with what
Mhm.
he's portraying Krypton as. That I found that to be one of the weaker moments, but I honestly portraying Jor-El and Lara in these ways. Honestly, they are the reason why Superman is so underdeveloped here, and Lois is basically in like what, two panels almost. Like it's just very, very, almost practically non-existent. The book really is, I would say, in this first issue, it's Jor-El and Lara's story. Superman kind of is, you know, obligatory. Like he had to be in there because it's absolute Superman number 1. But I think Aaron really wanted to start this story telling their tale.
Mm.
And actually, yeah, I did like the first act. Most of what was happening on Krypton, even though it was a little contrived, it was at least well structured and interesting, and I could
Yeah.
recognize character development there. It's just everything that followed didn't work for me at all. I thought shoehorning in the idea that Krypton was destroyed by global warming was also a little bit um, artificial, but you know, for the most part, the first act kind of worked for me. Just nothing else about this book did.
Yeah. And the diamond workers just looking like, everyone's favorite, street protesters.
Right.
None of those people look like they were mine shaft workers.
Yeah, what country exactly were these diamonds in? I'd like to know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. No, this was like, yeah, this is Earth at that point, right?
yeah.
It's I
And
think
they're having, like, mine carts full of, like, football-sized diamonds. I don't know.
it's an alternate Earth, and so they want
Mm,
to, so this is a version of Earth that's, I think very much controlled by this Lazarus company.
that's true.
So which we do get, I think, a hint at who's behind a chunk of that, because spoiler alert, everybody, we do see, I'll give a couple seconds, we see bottle cities.
Mhm.
So for the Superman lore people, you know what that tends to signify. It's Brainiac.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So Brainiac is gonna be the big bad, I guess.
Okay.
We haven't gotten to Lex Luthor yet, but, Brainiac is a good place to start. I would like to see that explored a little bit more. I just,
Mhm,
I need to see more character from Superman. I need to see the core dynamics of Superman, his, grounding in family, in traditional values, in home, in being away from home, being out of his element, wayward, lost. Either he's in the country and he's an alien and he's being raised by surrogate parents, or he's in the city and he's a country boy trying to figure his way through things. This Superman doesn't embody any aspect of the original
So
character.
I think this is where Aaron is gonna. I think this is where he's parking his car regarding this story. And again, I think this is where it's going to be hit or miss for people. I think that Superman will end up in a very similar place where he has the values that he's had historically about life and liberty and justice. The route he takes to them, which has been the pitch for this absolute series, I think how he gets there is going to be radically different. So I don't think there's going to be the surrogate parents. I think he's going to basically find the values through a different means by being an orphan who didn't have parents, and he has to make a surrogate family out of these poor workers, essentially, kind of like with
mhm,
Batman, where Batman basically becomes Batman through a completely different route, and so he ends up in a similar position, but by a completely different journey. So, like I said, I think that's really going to end up being where people either like this change or say, I can't recognize the character. So,
Yeah.
So, final take, Matsy, what did you think? Absolute Superman.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite of the Absolute series to look at, and I do appreciate there is a lot of intricacy and intentionality with the story. It just so it doesn't feel like it's been slapped together visually or script-wise. So I appreciate that. There were a lot of things that threw me out. It just remains to be seen. I don't really know why I'm reading it. You know what I mean? Like, I still haven't been really hooked other than and I felt like I was hooked with Absolute Batman. I feel like there were some visuals and enough, uh, character development where I felt like it was explaining itself as to why it needed to exist, you know? And this one, it just feels like it's still struggling with and against its own legacy. It's not quite I don't feel like it has a confident enough statement to make as to what it's doing and why it wants to do it this particular way. And maybe that's going to be something that we see by issue 2 and 3, where it really can stand on its own.
Twitless, give us your last take.
I definitely agree that it's probably a weaker start. But approaching Superman is a daunting task. He is in many ways the most important superhero. He's the OG. He's the most important one ever created. And so trying to say something new itself is complicated because people want don't even may not even want that. Um, I'm tentatively interested if Aaron can stop with some of the cringe. Sandoval was MVP for House of Brainiac, so I do enjoy the visual treat of his art. Um, I'm on the fence. I could go for a few issues. If Aaron takes it into super cringe territory, I'll check out pretty fast. I like Superman a lot. He's a great character. So I'm interested to see where he may take it, but cautiously optimistic, I guess.
I was flabbergasted by how thoroughly Jason Aaron dropped the ball on the storytelling in this issue, quite frankly. And I'll be in it for a couple more issues to see how it develops. But he essentially made Superman a throwaway character in his own book and doesn't introduce him until halfway through in the most ham fisted possible way I could imagine. Having him wake up in a rubble and say arbitrarily, I'm going to now help these people. And I didn't really want to before, but now I feel motivated to do so. So, no development there whatsoever, but establishing a lot of lore and telling of the environment. The cringe for me wasn't so much the social issues that he was trying to construct into the world of Krypton and Superman's universe. It was essentially how he was treating the character and the dynamics that we traditionally know to be part of the Superman that we all are endeared to. They were just completely barren in this story. And I really hope that he rectifies that in future issues.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.